Cloudflare earlier this year introduced a foundation. It's called Foundation because it's a foundational library intended to include all the things that you need for bringing your application into production. And that's usually the tough part, the boilerplate, all those things that you need, like logging and metrics and telemetry. There's so many. Oh, performance, like it actually has to perform at a production grade level. Well, guess what? This is what the Foundation library is specifically built for, and Cloudflare has open sourced it so that way we can use it ourselves. Yes, it is written in Rust, which is the latest up-and-coming language over the last several decades. It's been coming out for a while. I mean, take a look at this chart in terms of its rise in popularity here since 2015, and it just started it's just going on up. Rust is the language that we will be using, especially for high scale and performance, memory safety, and concurrency safety. All those things combined make Rust the most attractive language because 70% of the bugs when you release into production tend to be because of concurrency, race conditions, and memory errors. And Rust is specifically built to prevent you from even compiling an application that will cause those errors in the first place. And that's why we see that Cloudflare is providing all of their libraries going forward, and basically everything they're open sourcing and building internally in their house is going to be based here on Rust. Rust is going to be the language of choice for performance as well. And you need performance, and that's one of the requirements for production level systems. We're taking a look at Cloudflare's Foundation library, which is a Rust library that's purposely built for production systems that includes all the foundational components that you need in order to get your system out in production. Now, one of the common challenges, of course, is the problems that you'd have to build in. Every single app that you deploy has to have all these things in order to be a production level system, including, well, actually, let's take a quick peek here. What do we have? Logging, tracing, metrics, memory profiling, because it's pretty easy. Even though Rust is a memory safe language, a lot of other languages are as well. It's still really easy to use too much memory. And with memory profiling, it's you're able to grasp where the memory is going, right? Who's eating all the memory, like what functions and data pointers. Now this extra one, of course, you always want security, but they go a step further with syscall sandboxing, and I like that one. I'll probably take a look at that one a little bit more deeper here. They do mention here service configuration with documentation. Now I really like that idea. However, the way they have it represented in their example doesn't quite show what I was expecting. So here in their examples folder, they have an HTTP server. However, here's the thing that I have an issue with. So you can define your routes for your API like /hello, /shufu, /user, /room, /chat, whatever. This is great. However, they also require you to have this config file redefines the same thing. Having to do that twice is a little annoying, and then you have to upkeep that, so whenever you change one, you have to change the other. At least that's the way it reads here. It's just, it's fine, sure. I mean, it's just a thing to maintain. It would be nice if this is all you really had to do was configuration, but you're gonna need to do a lot more with models and fetching other data from other systems. So having to configure your endpoints and routes here directly inside of a YAML file. It's odd. It's weird. Maybe testing purposes for integration tests. I'm not sure, but I'd much rather the server itself having already registered the routes in a configuration, have the ability to return a YAML file in this format that already knows everything about the system. We're taking a look here at Cloudflare's Foundation library that they built in order to provide all the things that you need when you go to production. And let's take a look at all those features when you're building a Rust application for production. Obviously, performance is critical. So the library itself and all the features have been written in such a way that allow this performance to scale at production workloads. Now, obviously, you need a little bit more than that. And so let's take a peek here at what they offer in terms of features. Now, all these features they show here can be disabled in a modular fashion using cargo features. The default is enabled all by default because you want to use all these things because they are a general requirement or expectation of a production level system. Some of these things, such as like settings and server client common defaults, I mean, there's nothing like really dramatic there, but here's where we start seeing some interesting things like telemetry, right? We got metrics, logging, tracing. Those things are what you like to have when you have a system running in production. You need that observability. You need to be able to see what's going on in your application so that way you can export that data from a logging perspective, right? You want to be able to log your data in a way that can go over to a log data lake of some sort that you could then either grep or search for or tail and see the most recent data, because your application in a production environment is going to be distributed and you're going to have multiple containers running on various systems. And what's interesting is it does appear that you can enable or disable each of those things independently. Directly, right? So metrics, logging, and tracing. Testing. Why is that something that you can enable or disable? That seems like a mandatory item, but it lets you disable it. This is one of my favorite ones right here, security. They have, look, only on Linux. It looks like they have two targets, the x86 or the ARM64. These are the two options. This is something I kind of like. So you're running on Linux, right? Usually you're probably running on Linux, and you're able to make system calls from your process to get information from the kernel. And the kernel has a lot of features and capabilities, specifically networking, disk, and a whole bunch of other things. The kernel makes it easy for you so that way you can interact with all the interfaces within the system that have shared resources. And one of these really neat things is you can specify in your application from a security perspective to only allow certain things, such as access to network, service basics, async. That's interesting. And then you call this enable syscall sandboxing with a violation that would terminate the process. And you pass in all the flags, right? All the flags here in this case are going to be a bitmap. And then you pass in the bitmap of allowed different system calls that you can have. And guess what? If your application, for whatever reason, might get exploited or someone else is trying to elevate system privileges, it's going to automatically destroy that process and start over from the beginning. That is cool. I didn't know. I mean, I really like that one. This is neat. This goes a little bit above and beyond probably where most of the industry has not yet entered into. And this being a foundational feature in the Foundations library is pretty powerful and meaningful. All right, it got even better. I was reading through Cloudflare's foundational library for Rust, and guess what? They provide a settings configuration that's built in code, and it goes the way I was hoping. I was originally reading it in a way where you have to define the YAML and the source code at the same time, and that's having to maintain two separate locations of definitions, and you'd have to keep the two in sync. And obviously that's an anti-pattern because as a developer you only want to have to do things once, and if you need to make a change you don't have to change two things. The cool thing is they did it the way I was hoping, and what you can do is simply define all of your structure of your application in the settings RS file here, and this will in turn generate, all the routes and the status response codes expected will generate a YAML file that you can then use for other things. The code generates the YAML file, so you don't have to maintain a configuration file. Your application already knows itself what it's responsible for. This is pretty powerful. I do like this. This is neat. If you get the chance, definitely go check out the Cloudflare Foundations library. I mean, it's almost a framework at this point because yes, you can build and pick and choose each of the components within the library to pull into your existing framework and application, right? You could use all of this as a core foundation that allows you to create an application that does everything you need. You don't necessarily need to bring in too much more. Now, you kind of want that because you want lightweight, easy to maintain. You don't want to have too many libraries that you're pulling in. And this has all the foundational requirements for building and deploying a production grade application.